So week 2 of the NFL season did not disappoint, but was sadly filled with several injured quarterbacks. However, there were also some pretty crazy moments. Teams you thought would start out hot did not, and vice versa. Honestly, there's so many takeaways from this past week of football, and I'll break it all down in today's video right after. Alright, so week 2 featured some close games, insane finishes, and a few pretty devastating injuries, with the most notable, of course, being to Bengals starting quarterback Joe Burrow. During Sunday's game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, Burrow left in the first half with a toe injury and didn't return. And after seeing him in the locker room with crutches and a boot on his foot, people were definitely fearing the worst, and sure enough, it turns out Burrow has a grade 3 turf toe injury, which will require surgery and keep him out a minimum of 3 months. Keyword here is minimum. If it was exactly 3 months, he'd be back in time for the last few games of the season and the playoffs, but who knows if they'll even be in the playoff hunt by then without Burrow. If this does end his season, it'll be the 3rd season-ending injury he's had in just 6 seasons. Bengals fans are frustrated, rightfully so, at the football gods, but also at their own team for not giving Burrow an adequate O-line. Look at this. Their line has never finished higher than 27th in pass block win rate throughout Burrow's career. So that front office might have some reflecting to do, but in the meantime, they're looking to bring in a veteran QB in free agency, likely to back up Jake Browning. Shoot, maybe they trade for Jameis Winston because he's QB3 on their depth chart. Now let's give some credit to Browning though, because he kept them in the game after Burrow's exit. He did throw 3 interceptions, but late in the 4th, he led them on a 15-play, 92-yard drive that was capped off by a QB sneak to give them the win 31-27 over Jacksonville. Jamar Chase went nuclear in this game with 14 catches for 165 yards and a touchdown, and Mitchell Tinsley, the preseason sensation, made one heck of a one-handed grab for his first ever NFL touchdown. The Bengals are now 2-0 for the first time in the Zach Taylor era, but of course, all the attention is on Joe Burrow, since he will head to Minnesota in week 3 to take on a Vikings team that looked flat out awful on Sunday Night Football. And before I get to that game, I really do hope Joe Burrow can heal up, man, because another tough injury for him. It's got to be super upsetting, not depressing, I don't want to use that word, but just frustrating for fans that they have to go through this again. So I do feel for them in that regard, because anybody losing a top player like that, it just guts your season and it makes it very difficult. Anyway, J.J. McCarthy was making his home debut, but it was one to forget as he barely topped 150 yards through 2 picks, lost a fumble, took 6 sacks, and the offense failed to score a single touchdown. Basically, it was a disaster for the Vikings offense, who have really only looked good for 1 quarter across 2 games, and it was that 4th quarter against the Bears in week 1 where they put up 3 touchdowns. McCarthy didn't look good in this one. There's no way to spin it, but in his defense, he's without Christian Darrisaw, and the backup left tackle left the game early with a concussion. Then their starting center, Ryan Kelly, also left the game with a concussion, so their offensive line was not firing on all cylinders. On top of that, Aaron Jones left the game with a hamstring injury, and if all that wasn't enough, JJ himself got banged up. According to Adam Schefter, McCarthy suffered a high ankle sprain and is expected to be out 2 to 4 weeks. Considering the Vikings have a week 6 bye, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him again until week 7. That means the newly signed Carson Wentz is likely QB1 in the meantime. He pretty much just got there with UDFA Max Brosmer backing him up. So that means next week's matchup between the Vikings and the Bengals is going to be Jake Browning against Carson Wentz, a game that absolutely nobody asked for or wants. But back to Sunday Night Football, the Vikings honestly would have gotten blown out by more if it wasn't for the defense holding Atlanta to just 1 of 5 in the red zone. The Falcons opted to bench kicker Younghoe Koo and start John Parker Romo, a guy who actually kicked for the Vikings last season. Well, he had a successful revenge game because he went 5 for 5 on field goals, including a 54-yarder. So yeah, I think he won the kicking job. Atlanta's rushing attack could not be stopped. They totaled 218 yards on the ground on over 5.5 yards per carry. The Falcons ran 12 personnel, so 1 running back, 2 tight ends, and 2 wide receivers on 55 of their 63 plays on offense. That's the highest rate of any team since 2016. And it was working for them, so why the heck change it? Atlanta won 22-6, and we'll head to Carolina next for a divisional game against the Panthers. I'm going to chalk that one up as probably a win for Atlanta because the Panthers allowed 21 pressures against the Cardinals on Sunday, and the Falcons just had J.J. McCarthy running for his life for 3 hours straight. Arizona was up 27-3 over Carolina at one point, by the way, but Bryce Young tossed 3 touchdown passes to bring them within 5 and even recovered an onside kick, not Bryce Young, but the team, to have a chance at a game-winning touchdown drive. But the 18-year vet, Calais Campbell, ended that dream, coming up with a huge sack on 4th down to move Arizona to 2-0 following the 27-22 win. If it's any consolation, their first-round pick, Tet McMillan, looks like the real deal. He had his first 100-yard game on Sunday, and I'm sure that's going to be the first of many. Lions rookie wideout Isaac Tesla didn't have 100 yards, but he did make an insane one-handed catch for the second week in a row. Last week, he hauled in this touchdown with one hand, but they lost to the Packers, so couldn't really celebrate it, even though it was impressive. This week, though, he could celebrate after making this absurd grab along the right sideline for 29 yards. It helped set up the first of 3 touchdowns for Amon-Ra St. Brown, who could not be stopped by Chicago's secondary. Yeah, the Lions offense put on a clinic right in front of Ben Johnson, giving a 50 burger to their former offensive coordinator. I kind of felt a little bad, but hey, he chose to go to a division rival, so it is what it is. Last week's outing against the Packers had people questioning the Lions offense, but they looked like the Lions we've grown accustomed to watching, as they had a historic day with over 500 yards on offense, 5 passing touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns, the first time that's been done in team history. They also averaged a team record 8.8 yards per play, with Goff going 8 of 11 for 241 yards and 2 touchdowns on passes 10 or more yards downfield. So yeah, he was slinging that thing all over the place, and the Lions whooped the Bears 52-21. A tough start for Chicago, who's now 0-2 with both losses coming against divisional opponents. Let's talk about a rivalry game that was much more competitive, though, because the Cowboys and Giants went down to the wire in epic fashion. Russ connected with Wan'Dale Robinson to give New York a 3-point lead with 2.5 minutes left to go in the game. Dallas marched down the field and responded with a touchdown to George Pickens to retake a 4-point lead, but Russ threw a prayer up to Malik Neighbors, who hauled in the 48-yard touchdown. Giants up 3. Malik Neighbors hit him with the night-night celly, but it was a little too early because Brandon Aubrey is a freak and drilled this 64-yard field goal to send the game to overtime. Neither team wanted to win either, as overtime started out with 3 punts, but Russell Wilson threw this costly pick, which set up another Brandon Aubrey field goal, this time for the win. Cowboys 40, Giants 37. Crazy game. Aubrey became the first kicker in NFL history to make a field goal as time expired in both regulation and overtime of the same game. And in all, there were 6 lead changes in the fourth quarter and overtime, which tied an NFL record. Both offenses were putting up Madden-like numbers. Both teams combined for nearly 1,000 yards. Good God almighty, Russ had 264 yards on deep throws alone, the most by a quarterback during the next-gen era, so at least since 2016, probably even further back. But ultimately, his last deep throw resulted in that pick, and that's what sealed the game. So the Giants fall to 0-2, while the Cowboys are now 1-1. It's going to be the 0-2 Giants, by the way, in primetime next week against the 0-2 Kansas City Chiefs. More on the Chiefs later, but things are going to be a little more challenging for Dallas for a bit here after their starting center Cooper Beebe suffered a high ankle sprain, and it's expected to keep him out for 6 to 8 weeks. And with him going to IR, they won't need to clear up an additional roster spot for Jadeveon Clowney, who the team signed to a 1-year deal yesterday. But let's move on and talk Dolphins Patriots, because just like the last game, this one was absolutely drunk. Way too many Tank 7s if you've ever had that in Kansas City. Very good drinks. Anyway, the Patriots took an early 12-0 lead, but Miami nearly erased that by halftime. And then the second half featured 4 lead changes. The wildest sequence in this game came when Dolphins receiver Malik Washington housed the 74-yard punt return. Super impressive play, and it got the crowd all hype, but that died very quickly because on the kickoff, so the very next play, Antonio Gibson responded with a 90-yard return to put the Patriots back on top. From there, Tua threw a pick, and they turned the ball over on downs with their last possession as New England got the W 33-27, moving to 1-1 on the year. This game was sloppy as hell with 22 total penalties, but for the Patriots, Drake May and Ramondre Stevenson put the offense on their back. Ramondre caught 5 passes for a career-high 88 yards, including this beautiful snag down the right sideline. Drake May was a super efficient 19 of 23 with a couple of touchdowns through the air and another on the ground. The last 2 drives put a damper on what otherwise was an excellent day for Tua, to be honest here. Just 6 incompletions, over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. That offense was looking like their peak form that we're used to seeing at times. Tyreek Hill even had the most receiving yards in a game since week 14 of last year, but sadly, they couldn't get the job done, and the crowd rained down boos as they watched their team go 0-2. A team that is surprisingly 2-0, however, is the Indianapolis Colts. They beat the piss out of Miami last week and just beat Denver in a nail-biter that did end in a bit of controversy. Colts kicker Spencer Schrader missed a 60-yard field goal that would have given Indy the W, but wait, there was a flag on the play for leverage, aka using another player to vault himself up into the air to try and block the kick. This moved the ball up 15 yards, where Schrader got another crack at it and this time drilled it. Colts win 29-28. That had to sting for Broncos fans, especially because their kicker, Will Lutz, had just missed a 42-yard field goal the possession prior that would have put them up 5. For the Colts, Jonathan Taylor had himself a DAY, recording his 25th 100-yard game, which is the second most in franchise history. And on this 43-yard catch in the first quarter, Taylor hit a top speed of 22.38 miles per hour, which was the fastest of any ball carrier since Raheem Mostert back in 2020. Crazy. Then Danny Dimes, or Indiana Jones now, had that offense humming yet again as he threw for over 300 yards, the first time he's done that since week 2 of the 2023 season, almost 2 years ago exactly. Another impressive win for the Colts, who are officially sitting atop the AFC South at the moment. The Tennessee Titans, well, they're at the bottom after coming up short against the Rams on Sunday. Cam Ward did throw his first career touchdown pass, though, and it was an impressive one at that, as he chucked it across his body to his fellow rookie, Alec Iomanner. Tony Pollard also had a solid day on the ground, but other than that, this one was all Rams, as Devontae Adams went off for over 100 yards and a score. That was Devontae's 46th game of over 100 receiving yards, by the way, tying him for 11th all time, but only Julio Jones has more than him since he entered the league in 2014. One more, to be exact, and with Julio now retired, I think Devontae will be passing him up here very soon. Puka Nacua had 91 yards receiving, but also got loose for a 45-yard run on 4th and 1. The two of them combined for 69 nice% of the team's targets and showed exactly why they're one of the best receiver duos in the league. So they got the win, but so did the rest of the NFC West teams this week. The Seahawks took down the Steelers thanks in part to a pretty inexcusable mental error by Steelers running back, the rookie running back Caleb Johnson. Seattle was kicking off after a successful field goal, put them up by 3, and the kickoff went to about the 5-yard line where Johnson went to field it, but it bounced through his hands and into the end zone. Well, instead of running after it and getting it the heck out of the end zone or doing something there, he must have assumed it was a dead ball because he stood there and watched as Seattle recovered it for an immediate touchdown. It was a very wild moment in this game, and it gave Seattle a 10-point lead instead of Pittsburgh having the ball down by just 3. Seattle outscored them 24-3 in the second half as Sam Darnold overcame 2 first-half picks and finished just shy of 300 yards with a couple of tutties. Jackson Smith and Jigba eclipsed the 100-yard mark for the second week in a row and is now second in the NFL in both catches and yards. Meanwhile, DK Metcalf was held in check by his former team, aside from this 2-yard touchdown catch. In total, he had only 3 grabs for 20 yards. The defense was all over Rodgers, with 6 different players generating at least 1 pressure, including Byron Murphy II, who had a career-high 5 plus 1.5 sacks. The Seahawks are now the only team in the NFC West that have a loss, which I did not think would be the case after Brock Purdy was listed as week-to-week with turf toe. But shout out to Mac Jones, who came in and balled out in Purdy's place. Albeit it was against the Saints, but still, he didn't even have George Kittle out there, and he still had 279 passing yards and tied his career high with 3 touchdowns. Since 2019, this is the 4th time that they've started a season with 2 straight road wins, talking about the 49ers. In 2 of those seasons, they ended up making the Super Bowl, and in the other one, they made the NFC Championship. Well, they're going to need to get healthy before we even start thinking Super Bowl and all that stuff, but with the way Mac Jones looked out there on Sunday, I think he's more than capable of keeping this team afloat until Purdy is 100% or at least very close to it. They've got the Cardinals, Jags, and Rams up next. 2 division games on the docket, so we'll definitely be keeping an eye on Purdy's status. Next up, there were a couple of blowouts on Sunday, but I think just about everybody saw them coming. The Ravens beat the brakes off the Browns 41-17, with Lamar Jackson tossing 4 touchdown passes. Derrick Henry actually finished with his lowest amount of yards in almost 2 years. The defense and special teams came up big for them, though, as 4 of their 5 touchdowns were scored either by the defense or from the benefit of having a short field. That makes it pretty easy to win games, and when they did. Then the Bills handled the Jets in New York despite Josh Allen leaving for a moment with a bloody nose. It appeared that it could have been broken, and the training staff popped it back into place for him on the sideline. He did return, but holy smokes, look at this thing. That is a very swollen nose. He basically has a giant plum on his face. Josh didn't really do all that much with his arm, but he didn't need to. Buffalo ran for 224 yards and 3 touchdowns. James Cook accounted for 132 of those yards and 2 of those touchdowns, including this 44-yarder in which he made half the defense miss. For the Jets, Justin Fields also left the game with a concussion, and he's in jeopardy of missing week 3. Tyrod Taylor came in the game and threw a touchdown, and he'll fill in as the backup for however long Fields is out. But the Jets didn't really stand a chance in this one, and down they went 30-10. Quarterbacks getting injured, unfortunately, seems to be the theme of this week, because while the Commanders played on Thursday, we found out yesterday that Jaden Daniels was diagnosed with a sprained knee after the loss. Adam Schefter reported that the injury is not believed to be serious, adding that it remains uncertain as to whether or not he'll play this Sunday against the Raiders, though Ian Rappaport said his status was in doubt. Dan Quinn called him day-to-day, so who really knows? That could mean literally anything, and we'll have a better idea later on in the week once these injury reports start coming out. But yeah, you've got Jaden possibly out with a knee sprain, Brock Purdy out with turf toe, Joe Burrow out for possibly maybe the entire season with an extreme case of turf toe, Justin Fields is in concussion protocol, and then J.J. McCarthy can miss a few games with a high ankle sprain. This is the sad reality of the NFL, and you hate to see it every single year. Something else I hated to see as a Chiefs fan was the Chiefs losing to the Eagles in this Super Bowl rematch, but it was far from a blowout, if you want to take a positive out of it. And it was actually a pretty entertaining game, more of a defensive slugfest than anything else. The Chiefs defense held Saquon in check and really the entire offense of the Eagles for a large chunk of the game. The Chiefs offense struggled on their side of the ball and are down, obviously, Rice and Worthy. And then Kelsey dropped the pass at the 1-yard line that turned a would-be touchdown to bring the Chiefs up into a 41-yard interception for Philly, and they ended up scoring a touchdown on that drive to make it a 10-point game. That was ultimately too much to overcome, as Harrison Butker earlier on also missed a field goal. Then the Chiefs failed a 4th down conversion near their own 35-yard line, and the Eagles turned that into 3 as well. That's too many costly mistakes against the defending Super Bowl champs, and so the Eagles head to 2-0, while the Chiefs fall to 0-2 for the first time in the Patrick Mahomes era. Next up, Monday Night Football featured not 1, but 2 games, with the first being between the Texans and Bucs, and it went down to the wire. Jalen Knowles' 53-yard punt return helped set up this touchdown run by Nick Chubb. That gave Houston a 1-point lead with just over 2 minutes to go after they couldn't convert on the 2-point attempt. Baker Mayfield came into this game without his starting left tackle, Tristan Wirfs, and then lost his starting right tackle, Luke Gedeke, late in the 4th quarter. That had a drastic effect on their offense, as Baker averaged 3.31 seconds to throw before Gedeke exited and just 2.23 seconds without him. That allowed Will Anderson to record a career-high 10 pressures, the most of any pass rusher in a game through the first 2 weeks of the season, and Danielle Hunter had 2 sacks plus a forced fumble. That's why it was extremely impressive to see Baker engineer a successful 2-minute drill at the end of the game. He converted a crucial 4th and 10 with his legs and hit on some quick passes before Rachaad White punched in the go-ahead touchdown, and that gave Tampa the win, 20-19. The Bucs were leaning on their ground game with both their tackles out, and it worked because Bucky Irving and Rachaad White combined for a 60 63% rushing success rate, the highest rate by Tampa Bay running back since 2021. So the Bucs are going to move to 2-0 for the fourth straight season, and they've done it every single year since Todd Bowles took over in 2022. Meanwhile, the Texans dropped to 0-2 and have a couple of massive divisional games coming up on their schedule. They had chances to win this game, even trying to go for it at the goal line and couldn't convert. And from there, fans were raining down boos off and on all game. It was pretty sad for the Texans and watching them not be able to get it done. But the Bucs did, and get this, both of the Bucs wins have come from trailing in the fourth quarter with just 1 minute to go, and the only other team starting off in such fashion was the 1979 Browns. And since joining the Bucs in 2023, nobody has more fourth quarter touchdowns than Baker Mayfield. Basically, be afraid of this team late in games. And then the Chargers looked dominant for the second week in a row after getting another divisional win, this time over the Raiders. Brock Bowers was questionable with a knee injury, but he did suit up, although he was wearing a pretty large knee brace and didn't look 100% out there. He caught 5 passes for just 38 yards. Geno Smith didn't look great out there either, but not because he was hurt, more because he could not crack this Chargers defense. He threw 3 picks on the night, so many passes into double coverage. He even threw a pass away, like out of bounds on 4th down. I don't know what this man was thinking. It was a rough night for him, to say the least. On top of that, the Raiders failed to reach the end zone a single time. Justin Herbert managed the game well, throwing for 242 yards and a couple of touchdowns, one to Keenan Allen, and then a deep shot to Quentin Johnston, who's off to a great start this season. LA forced those 3 INTs and held the Raiders to 0 for 3 in the red zone, and that ultimately got them a comfortable victory, 20-9. Jim Harbaugh gets the bragging rights over Pete Carroll in this one, spoiling Pete's 74th birthday, by the way. Keep your eye out for Khalil Mack news, though, because he left the game early with an elbow injury. It did not look good. Your elbow's not supposed to bend the way that it did. He was ruled out for the game and finished it by watching on the sidelines with his arm in a sling. So that could potentially be a big loss for them. We'll see, but they are now solely in first place of the AFC West, with another big one next week against the Denver Broncos. It's still very early on in the season. Obviously, a lot of football left, but it does feel strange to see the Chargers at the top and the Chiefs at the bottom. Crazier things have happened, and week 3 is going to be filled with even more. We'll break it all down in next week's weekly recap, and with that, I'll see y'all next time.